See how that goes. There we go. Now it's working.
Cool.
Well, yeah, I don't know. And it's kind of like, it's all just, it's obvious to say, I guess, about the strange new world we live in. But, Allie's father was observing, like, he's lived through a couple wars and, like, just so much. Like, the advent of the internet, all these things. And he's like, this last few months is the weirdest I've ever seen. The whole COVID thing. And it is strange. It is weird to think that it's just this new paradigm that I don't know. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I was just thinking that the other day. I was out in public and just everyone wearing masks. Granted, I'm in LA where people are more prone, at least, culturally, it seems to buy into the masks and stuff. But still
Yeah.
strange. I don't know, just that it's our new normal. We some friends were in from out of town, and we kind of saw them last night, and it was like hanging out outside, everybody wearing masks, sitting way apart, like and I don't know, just surreal. Like that's just life now. That's just how we are. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like that will be the case for a while anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, you go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I was just gonna share one thing from last week. Someone wrote and just said, "Hey, man, I just wanted to thank you and Dr. Nick for your help this past week. After you read my email on the live stream, I've been quite good about applying some of the tools you mentioned, mainly writing down achievable goals and breaking down major tasks into smaller ones. And I got a lot of things done. I feel like I have a long way to go, but I hope I can stay on this track. Thanks again. I'll be tuning into today's live stream, and I kind of hope this continues even after the coronavirus in one way or another." Yeah, I don't know. I just want to share it.
Oh,
I just
that's
think it's
great.
nice. It's nice to hear,
Oh,
you
that's
throw this
awesome,
stuff
man.
into the void, and it's nice.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great. It's all. I mean, that's why we do this stuff is to hear things like that.
Yeah,
I would also just say that no one stays on track forever.
yeah,
It's just like mindfulness, where if you could effortlessly focus your attention on something without getting distracted, you wouldn't need to practice mindfulness because you'd be like you would already have achieved that goal. So it's about the process. It's about when you inevitably get off track, which you will, just noticing that and trying to come back to behaviors
yeah,
that have been effective for you as quickly as you can.
yeah,
That's all. And there's no cosmic judge, jury, and executioner hanging over you, judging you for how well you do that. It's just about its effectiveness in your life. So without the guilt, um, and without the I need tos, just set a time and goal when you're going to.
yeah. Speaking of getting off track, it's interesting. I ran out of one of my main like for my Adderall ADD medication, and I've been off it a few days, and it's really strange. I guess I haven't had the chance in a while. Jeez, it's freaking hot in LA. I haven't had the chance in a while to really experience my brain without that chemical, and it's weird. It's different, and I think it's just interesting to notice like subtle ways things change, especially with ADHD stuff. Again, just the way it's known, the way it's thought of, is so specific. It's so like just hyperactive that that's what people think of it as. And I do have a little bit of that. I do have a little bit of like a chatterbox quality. And Allie was observing. I tend to like go. I spool faster. She said it's like when you're flying a kite. And sometimes in the kite, like the kite will hit one of those things where it goes like, you know. She's like, you're like that, just a little bit more like in those modes.
Sounds right. Yeah.
And and I was like, yeah, I see that. And I was thinking a couple things. One, it's interesting. Well, first I'll talk about this. One, if anybody else has ADHD out there, and I don't know if you have much experience with ADHD people or anything like that, but one thing that isn't, I think, observed or isn't initially thought of as associated with it is like the the emotional regulation part of it, like how reactive you are to things, more or less so when you're treated or not, when you're medicated or not. And I've definitely noticed that, like, my rejection sensitivity is way higher for sure, like I more than it is normally, which is already pretty something I have to like be very mindful of, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It's just this like any perceived rejection, you're just like, is that it's this hypersensitivity to people's reactions and feelings around you, and all, and just the constant hypervigilant perception about like if somebody's disappointed in you or disapprove or like anything that could be remotely rejection-y. And I've noticed like that gets more sensitive, and with that, sort of just emotional regulation in general, because ADHD, I guess, is misdiagnosed as depression a lot of the times in people, in adults at least, who go and end up being diagnosed as ADHD. And I think it has to do with like this like ability to get like frozen, this sort of ability to be so overwhelmed, and then also there's that you kind of freeze up, and then also the rejection thing, like feeling like you keep screwing up and you're scolded so much that just like self-esteem takes this sort of hit, and you just kind of like collapsed in on yourself to just sort of like try not to do anything because you don't want to be disappointing to anybody. And I don't know, I don't think it hasn't like hit hard, but it's just interesting to notice like it coming back. And time management is way worse for sure, like any sense of like where I'm at. Like even today, like I woke up this morning kind of early, mostly because my stomach hurt because I drank alcohol last night. It was horrible. And I decided to try to get some work done. So I was working on some of this stuff for one of the other podcasts that I help work on. And then like we were getting ready to do this, and I was like, I bet I could get one run in of this video game that I could get one raid, and I couldn't. Of course I couldn't. I was like, Allie came in here like 3 minutes before 10 and was like, "Are you doing the Goodbye Brain?" And I was like, oh, yeah. I am. I'm just Nick's getting ready. I'm getting ready. Hey. And I was just like, fuck, man, that sucks. That just doesn't feel good to be like, I did the thing again that I do, where I just, we're like time management. We're just like, I'm gonna do that, or the next thing that gives me dopamine, I'm gonna play a quick run of this video game. Like, I don't know, it just feels like a little it's just a bummer. I don't know, to like set back with some habit stuff that like I know is detracting, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Just stuff to observe, I guess. It doesn't like automatically go away when I'm suddenly on medication. Anyway, that's the negative side of it. The other side of it that I thought was interesting is like, I know there's no questions here really. I'm just kind of like ruminating, but like the other thing that was interesting was I do feel a little more creative than normal. Not so much in the sense of like an idea, but like the inclination to go do the thing. Like part of ADHD is like impulsivity, and maybe a positive aspect of impulsivity is like follow through to some degree, like that it might be erratic, but you're just more likely to go like, I got this idea, and then go do it, perhaps to the detriment of other things, but at least you do it. Whereas I don't know, I've noticed over the last year of being medicated and stuff, maybe I'm less not creative in the sense of like imaginative, but creative in the sense of creating, like going and doing a thing that I had an idea to do, because I'm just like, well, I don't really have time for that, or I have these other things I need to do first. And that kind of bums me out a little. I think it's like it speaks to that common fear and demon that like, oh man, if I start taking antidepressants, then I'm going to lose my whole personality, I'm going to lose my creativity, I like the ups and downs. It's what makes me who I am. I don't know. Do you ever experience that with people or patients who are just like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like this fear to try to get better because you're worried the good parts of you will go away?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, definitely. And first, I think any like, relatively big adjustment is just hard, and it's disruptive and challenging, so especially if it's, well, not especially, but that includes medication changes, or initiating medication or coming off medication. Like,
Yeah.
just, it's going to add an element of unpredictability and disruption to whatever normal circumstances of disruption you're experiencing. You know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
usually when people, I mean, the best way to like try to taper off or experiment with coming off of medications a responsible way, in conjunction with the provider, is to try it when things are pretty good, when
Yeah.
everything else is like pretty stable. So you're just introducing that one variable. But if it happens outside of that context, then yeah, it becomes very hard to, make sense in your own mind of like what is causing these changes in how I feel. Is, evaluating them. Is it good? Is it bad? What does it mean about me? All that, those kind of questions I think are really normal.
Yeah.
And I think it's healthy to explore those and explore the feelings to a certain extent. I think you
Yeah.
got to put a limit on it. So if you're, not you in particular, but if someone finds themselves, like ruminating about this stuff for hours on end and it's getting in the way of their other goals and behaviors, then I think you got to put some strict limits around it. Like, all right, I'm going to just sit here and ruminate about this for 20 minutes. And at the end of that 20 minutes, no matter how intrusive the thoughts are, I'm just going to do something else, whether it's go for a run or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but short answer, yeah, it's normal. I mean, I remember working with a guy, very high functioning guy, very smart, high achiever, who had a true bipolar 1 disorder, and had that kind of some worries like that, where he was on an appropriate medication for that condition and was doing well on it, but was worried about like, or had thoughts about not being his true self, which was a little bit of like a chaotic dude. I mean, despite the fact that now he was like by all kind of external benchmarks doing super well, he had inside of him this like little bit of a love for just chaos and disaster.
Yeah.
So we had to talk about, well, okay, how can you like, I'm not sure how to say it. How can you make space for that kind of part of yourself in a way that, is controlled enough that it's not going to blow up this life that you've like slaved to build for the last 10 years, but how can you kind of indulge that part of yourself in a healthier way?
What'd you come up with?
We talked about like, like shit like skydiving and other kind of adrenaline, high adrenaline activities.
Yeah.
If, like every now and then allowing yourself to have a kind of a banger, but like literally giving your keys to your wife before you go out the door to do that, so you just don't have, basically stimulus control so that you're removing things from the environment that could really cause serious problems.
Yeah, that's smart. I was discussing that with my little brother the other day because he's got some similar diagnoses to me and, similar genetics. And we're talking about our dad who's got this gambling thing and a bunch of other similar genetics and whatever. And we were talking about the gambling thing in particular and that we related to it and that this realization we had that it's not the payoffs. It's not even like the high of when you win. It really is the chaos that's attractive. This like weightless moment when the slot machine is still spinning and that like it translates into other things that we do compulsively. That like it is that chaos, that unsettled chaos where like anything could be anything that that really for some reason is what's attractive. And I don't really know why. I was saying it reminded me of like sort of the tyranny of the blank page kind of thing. Like that there was this, like in chaos, you aren't your agency is removed from you to a certain degree. So like to me, the feeling is like in chaos, you can't be responsible for anything. You just react, and so it's like any positive outcome or anything even approaching a normal type of capability in that chaos is like something to be rewarded and celebrated, and versus in regular life it's just like failure, failure to act or do anything. Like I don't know, how can I explain this? Like if I'm able to operate at a normal ability in chaos, that's like very impressive. But if I am normal, it's certainly not excellent in non-chaos, and there's nothing impressive about that. You're just like a guy. And there's something about like feeling like you have a body or a brain that functions at a normal level in chaos is like, well, oh, if I can be in this parameter where I look very impressive and feel very impressive, I'm going to live there, because just being normal there is amazing, versus being normal in everyday existence feels sometimes like just crippling. Just like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what choices to make. I don't know what to do with the tyranny of the blank page type of thing of my life, or the literal page. Versus in chaos, it's like, hey, are you surviving? Then you're killing it. If you're in chaos and you're just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the Tony Soprano paradox, right? Where he's
Dude.
like in like a life or death, high stakes situation, he's like effortless at managing all those things. But then when it's like, fucking, like singing Plastic Fish, reminding him of some deep, weird shit, and just sitting on the couch Christmas morning, he like is paralyzed.
It's interesting. You mentioned Sopranos the other week, just we were chatting. And so I have been rewatching it like while I work out and stuff. And I am blown away at how good the show is again.
Yeah.
Like I watched when I was a teenager, but now that I'm older too, and I've like explored more like mental health stuff, there's so much in the show that's even more relevant and impressive that they like nailed it. Like his reaction to the medications in the first season when he's like in these weird state, just trying out Prozac and lithium and stuff, is like, oh wow, I didn't even pick up on that stuff in the first time around, yeah. Anyway.
It's really great. But, to your point, I think that, there are people who just have a predisposition to functioning well kind of in, in fight or flight, or like in more of an unpredictable, chaotic mode. Because probably, that set of predispositions was very advantageous in certain circumstances in our evolution. So it makes sense that there are people who are like really good at doing that.
Yeah.
We have like a very specific set of parameters that are, that are like considered normal now, a very narrow set of parameters about what's considered sane and normal.
Yeah.
And so, the behaviors that are well suited to those parameters, some people are naturally predisposed to have those, and because of the way that they learned and grew up, their environment that they kind of did their early learning in, they're even better suited to those. And some people aren't, and it's just fucking hard to like learn those skills. And again, we have this moral dimension where it's like, well, if you're somehow not great at abiding by these particular specific modern parameters, or you don't really like them, that somehow that's like a moral failing, even though they've only been relevant for like the last 30 years. I mean, 100 years ago is really different. If you were living out in rural, Utah 100 years ago, shit looked real different. The adaptive parameters were real different. 100 years before that were real different too.
But it does feel like the modern sort of stuff is still just relevant in the sense that like, yes, I will tell myself the stuff you're telling me all the time. I'll contextualize for myself, like, whatever. It's relatively new to feel like a failure because of these things. But I don't know, something that was always really tough for me, but still feels true, is like sort of like feeling like I'm letting people down around me who believe in my potential or something like that. And that by not living up to my potential, you're fucking up and you're like letting those people down. And I think that's like fairly new, I guess, in civilization or something like that to some degree. But still feels very real. I still feel like I just don't want to.
Sure.
I mean, I have this weird memory when I was a kid that my mom said some judgy stuff about her brother once, her like little brother. And I remember like that he didn't do anything. He had so much potential kind of a thing and I remember being like, dude, I think his life rocks. Like he's got some kids and grows some grapes in his yard and he got this like Mustang he works on and like what the fuck because he's not like world traveler or something. Like what are you talking about? You know, I was like really annoyed about it. This like young and I think I was projecting as well. Like, why are you being so hard on him? Like I'm like that. You're hard like that on me. Like if I'm not impressive enough.
Mm.
But it is still, I don't know. Sometimes I do still feel disappointed. Like this notion of a potential to live up to or not. I don't know. I guess I'm saying, I don't know why I'm defending this or saying this. It's like, I, for myself, to make myself feel better, often think to myself, like, hey, you're surviving. You're beating out 99% of the human race. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing good. But then after baseline, there is this other thing of like, I'm disappointed in myself. You know?
Yeah, well, so here's like yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I think there is a nice like DBT assumption, which is, because DBT is dialectical behavior therapy, and a dialectic, in the sense that it's used in therapy, is about like integrating polarities, or a dialogue between polarities that seem to be mutually exclusive. Um, and so one of the assumptions that people make in DBT is, well, you're probably doing the best you can right
Mm-hmm.
now, and you could also do better. And so I
Yeah.
think that's one of the, I kind of like that, but because otherwise it's easy to get stuck in these polarities where it's like, uh, I'm doing the best I can, period. But then there's like this voice in your head that's like, yeah, but
But
things
yeah.
could be different.
Yeah.
And then somehow, if you believe that, then it means you're not trying hard now, and then you
Yeah.
feel shitty and guilty. But actually, both can be true at the same time. You,
Yeah,
you
that's
can be
true.
doing the best you can right now, like truly. And it is within your capacity also to do better.
Yeah. It's
So,
interesting. I feel like effort is a really tough thing to measure. Um, because most of the time we talk about objective measures of wellness and things like that. And that's much more helpful. But like I'll just use as an example, like if we are talking about effort, about like trying, how hard are you trying? I've been doing this like workout program again recently, a new thing, and some of it is stuff that feels like it was easy for me at some point. And it's so unpleasant and so hard to slog through these workouts, but I've been making myself do them, and I can't measure that as like the effort is something I don't know how to measure because the measurements on paper are like not nearly as impressive as or how it felt, but it feels like the hardest workouts I've ever done just because of the sense of effort,
totally,
you know? So
totally,
I don't know.
yeah.
That thing is
And
like I'm doing the best I can. I could be doing better. Is really interesting. And I guess also it seems important to like have I don't know, maybe have like a softer relationship with like objectivity and measurement of how good am I, how well am I, you know?
oh yeah, I also think, that all those things are masquerading as very objective, but they aren't. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that doing better necessarily has to be a measure of effort. That could be one dimension, but I don't think it has to be. Like doing the best you can, but also, having the capacity to do better doesn't necessarily, to me, suggest trying harder. It could be trying in a different way. It could even
Mm,
be moving the benchmark and not trying as hard. You know?
right.
So I think just like, the idea that somehow I need to try harder at everything to do better, I don't buy that. I think
Mm.
there's a much broader universe of possibility there.
That is a hard
Um,
concept to get through to people, especially if they're like very achievement oriented, I think. Like I feel like I've
yeah, I don't
tried to
think that
communicate in
those
the past
people
sometimes.
should be involved in the discussion.
Yeah.
If it's like a very black and white, well, you either did 10 reps at 315 or you did 8. See, that's not the type of person who I think is going to productively add to this type of dialogue.
Well,
You know?
I know, yes, but I mean, like, even someone who's very achievement oriented, and you're like, it's hard to teach people. It's very interesting what you just said. The thing about, like, the version of trying harder right now is going to be trying less. Like, trying to get people to get through their heads, like, the challenge that you need to overcome is one of, like, releasing and doing less, and how hard that can be, because it doesn't feel like someone, who's oriented to, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, displeasure seems to be inherent to the notion of hard work or something like that.
Yeah.
And trying to,
Yeah. Look, and I think, I'm certainly not against hard work. I mean, fuck, I think it's like,
right,
it is one of the truly like freeing activities you can do, and
right.
really provides a lot of mastery and pleasure. Like, I think,
Yeah.
there's really nothing quite as magical as hard work in some circumstances. I mean, in terms of its ability to make you feel good. Um,
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying is that when you're trying to expand your skill set, you don't always get to feel good. And feeling good, um,
Got it.
whatever the vehicle, shouldn't always be the end goal, because it's not effective. Sometimes changing and expanding your repertoire of behavior is going to mean feeling uncomfortable and
Right.
resisting the urge to feel good.
Yeah.
You know?
I
So yeah,
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
I mean, like, banging out 9 hours of just fucking hard work. If you get a, if you can do that more frequently and more attentively, that's awesome. But most people probably aren't going to be able, who don't have to, or who don't for their subsistence have to, probably are going to have to expand their skill set in order to be effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone sent a question in while we were talking. Can you guys talk about DID and paranoia? I thought I knew what DID was, but maybe due to something that happened recently, I'm wondering if I had wrong information. I don't know what DID is. What's DID?
Are they talking about dissociative identity disorder?
That must be what it is. Is that related to
Yeah, I
paranoia?
mean, so dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder. I don't really. I've not seen any evidence to suggest that it's possible to truly have multiple identities that aren't aware of each other. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I've not. Okay, so I've had. It's also extremely rare in the clinical literature. I just don't really buy it, frankly. I did have one patient who uh, um, believed that they had dissociative identity disorder, and really what it had done in her previous um, kind of clinical work with other therapists was become an avoidance vehicle. All the therapists were like very interested in it because it's very rare and kind of crazy and interesting, like, ooh, multiple personalities. And so the work was always about like integrating those multiple personalities. And she didn't want to do that. And I was like, okay, well, can everybody come to therapy? Can everybody show up to therapy? She was like, yeah, okay. And we just like didn't ever talk about it again. And we just talked about the other shit, the cutting, the other self-harm behavior, the like insulin resistance, all this type of other shit.
Yeah.
We had a really good clinical outcome. So, what people say in the field is that often dissociative identity disorder is a coping strategy for experiencing a lot of really terrible early childhood trauma, early childhood sexual trauma. It's a way for the psyche to compartmentalize and whatever. I mean, yeah, and I think I wouldn't, unless it's something that's like really bothering the individual, I wouldn't treat it as like a clinical focus. I would still just do the trauma work. If the person's presenting with trauma symptoms, I would just do the trauma work. I would just say, hey, can everybody show up for therapy and do the trauma work? Again, there are a lot of different perspectives about DID. Mine is that it's often an avoidance behavior, not like that people are trying to avoid. It's just a functional avoidance behavior, and we should focus more on really what is causing the problems in the person's life. But again, I've only had one person that, you know, describe those diagnostic criteria.
Yeah.
Paranoia is something different. I mean, paranoia or paranoid ideations can be part of several different diagnostic categories. Most pronounced and most common in schizophrenia. Um, but yeah, I mean, you need a good clinical workup. I mean, typically people who are truly paranoid don't have the insight to know that they're being paranoid. They just really believe that they're being persecuted or followed or whatever.
What is do
So
you? I think I might have thought that schizophrenia and what you just described as dissociative identity disorder slash used to be called multiple person. I think I used to think those are the same thing. What characterizes schizophrenia?
well, there are a lot of different presentations, but the big two are going to be uh, um, positive symptoms and negative symptoms in schizophrenia. So the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, the things that are there but shouldn't be there, are going to be things like delusions, which are fixed beliefs that are contradicted by observable reality, and uh, hallucinations, which are going to be sensory perceptions that are not consistent with observable reality. So
Got it.
delusions, fixed beliefs, and hallucinations, sensory perceptions, both of those things not consistent with the observable reality.
Got it.
So often you would have a paranoid delusion where you believe that, whatever, the FBI is putting microphones in your apartment, or you're part of a, secret QAnon pedophile hunting club that's,
Right.
Whatever. That you're Jesus, that's very common, or that you're secretly very powerful and wealthy, but that there are organized forces trying to prevent you from accessing your power and wealth, stuff like that. I've been in a inpatient psychiatric unit with several people who believe that they were Jesus, which is always interesting on the rounds. So that's positive symptoms, things that are there but shouldn't be there. Then you have negative symptoms, which are things that are not there but should be there. And that's kind of like the ability to read social cues, the desire for social contact, like a full range of emotion. Typically, the kind of typical, although it can be varied, presentation of schizophrenia is absence of the full normal range of emotion, so like a constricted range of emotion. Yeah.
Got it. What about dissociation? Is that
so
the notion of
dissociation is very
yeah.
different from dissociative identity disorder.
Right.
So dissociative identity disorder, again, is this belief that you have multiple personalities inside, or identities inside of one brain.
Yes.
But dissociation is, again, it can occur and often does in the context of trauma or other like emotional stimuli that are really distressing and hard to manage. And essentially, it's losing contact with your sensory reality. So feeling like you're not there anymore, like retreating kind of
Right.
into the ether, and you don't really have access to your thoughts and sense perceptions. Almost kind of like a fuzzy white blanket being dropped in front of your sense perceptions.
I feel
And then there's
like
depersonalization, which is something different, which is when you're like outside of your body.
depersonalization.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I experienced that dissociation periodically. I was describing again, this is in ADHD there's something called body doubling, which is like a strategy for getting work done, is just have somebody with you, basically. Like just have someone in the room, study groups or whatever. Just they don't have to be working on anything with you, just having someone there. And I found that really helps me overall, like just in general, just having Allie around, having anybody around. And I think it's because when I'm alone, it feels like I'm not like doing full dissociation every day. I'm not like saying that that's a thing. But if I am alone, left to my own devices, I feel like I can kind of just dissolve into like nothing really easily. Like nothing is anything, nothing means anything, nothing matters. I'm just kind of like this blob, and then the day is over. And I don't know. It's just it freaks me out a little bit. And I was just asking about it because, again, I have tools to mitigate it now. I know about it. I try to reach out to friends is always like the best thing for me for most of my stuff that comes up and crops up. Just have, a few people on speed dial that I know I can check in with to help me out, whether it's depression, whether it's whatever it is. That stuff reminded me though, because related to this is I was going to ask you, like, like depression seems to exist on a spectrum. Like you don't have to be severely, cripplingly depressed to have some depression to like, does that exist with like schizophrenia? Like sometimes I'm like some of that stuff, like delusions and not really, probably not hallucinations, but like I'm like I feel like I have that shit sometimes, but not. I wouldn't say I'm schizophrenic, but you know what I mean? Like, do some of these other more severe things?
I can guarantee you that you're not.
Thank you, but you know what I'm saying? Like, do any of these other things like exist on a spectrum the way like depression does?
Everything exists on the spectrum. Yeah. All human characteristics exist on the spectrum. So absolutely, it exists on a spectrum of severity.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ellen Sachs is like a Harvard professor. She's diagnosed with schizophrenia and is obviously very functional. So it really depends. I mean, like, people who have a onset of positive symptoms later in life and don't really have a lot of negative symptoms, like they're socially very functional like throughout most of their life, and then they get these positive symptoms, they tend to have a fast onset, like what's called a first break, like a very fast first break, as opposed to kind of like a slow burn where there's a lot of negative symptoms all through like school and then some slow onset of positive symptoms. That type of slow burn with negative symptoms tends to have a worse prognosis, whereas a late onset without a lot of negative symptoms and then a first break with pronounced positive symptoms, that seems to have a better prognosis. So yeah, they're all on a spectrum. I mean, it's kind of what the typologies are different now, like in the DSM-5, but a more kind of like paranoid flavor that tends to be more, have a better prognosis than a real disorganized type of schizophrenia where the person really has like literally like word salad coming out that doesn't make any sense at all. So that tends to be to have a worse prognosis. So the medications are much better now. Also, like the type 2 antipsychotics are much less damaging long term, though still problematic than the type 1 antipsychotics. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, it's definitely on a spectrum for sure. But schizophrenia is very rare. It's like 1% of the population. So it's unlikely that, if people are sitting there thinking like, well, fuck, I have some thoughts that might be delusional. It's like, well, you have a 99% chance of not having schizophrenia. So
if you want, like, are there strategies, like if you do feel like you're starting to be crazy, like whether it's mild dissociation or getting kind of paranoid and delusional in your thinking, you just left your own devices, like, similar to like with depression, there's like stuff you can do to be like, let's try to mitigate some of this by doing these behaviors. Is there stuff you can do, like if you're experiencing that kind of, any sort of, I don't know, I feel like some of this like dysphoria related to body stuff, like body dysmorphia or dysphoria, things like some of these things I feel like, body issues feel easy to translate into some of.
Interestingly, the kind of third wave psychotherapy approach to this stuff is effective for all kinds of thoughts and feelings, whether they're objectively verifiable or not, So like a kind of mindfulness-based approach to delusions and hallucinations is also effective at reducing the amount of distress people feel as a result. It doesn't matter if your thought is like, if thinking about not having enough money, which is real, bothers you a lot, or thinking that you're being followed by aliens bothers you a lot. You could treat those thoughts the same way, which is like, this is a thought that I'm having right now.
Yeah,
it's causing me distress, and so I'm going to just acknowledge that I'm having this thought. It's here. Here are the feelings I have as a result. But now I'm going to decide: is it worth my time to invest more attention in this thought, or do I want to invest my attention somewhere else? Which is not pushing away that thought or denying its reality. We're actually not entering into the realm of evaluation of that thought at all. just acknowledging that thought, acknowledging the feelings that seem to be attached to it, and then making a decision. What do I want to focus on right now?
Yeah.
You can do that with, you know, any kind of content. It doesn't matter what the content is, because you're not engaging in an evaluative process with the content. Because what that actually does is feed more attention into that thought. That's the functional outcome of engaging with the content. By engaging with it, you're actually feeding its power. And so the mindful approach is to just observe it from a distance, and then make a decision about what you want to focus on.
Somebody asked some more questions in the chat I didn't notice, but I think you answered them. How common or uncommon is DID? Like you said, it was very, very uncommon.
I think it's extremely uncommon because I don't really think it's real. But
Right.
other people might say that. I mean, I don't know what the prevalence is, but my guess is it's 1% or lower. I mean, just think about what it would mean. What does it mean to have multiple identities living in the same brain structure who don't have access to each other? I mean,
Right.
how would we, from a biological perspective, explain that? Now, I think what definitely is real is people experiencing different parts of themselves and using that framework to make sense of their experiences. I definitely think people do that. I just think that the kind of solution for that is not to get sucked into a DID kind of discussion, unless that's something that's like really upsetting and damaging to people. I think, and my personal experience being an N of 1, we were able to do really good work just not focusing on that at all.
Yeah.
Then it kind of stopped coming up.
Someone else, they also says, can you talk about age-related paranoia? Is that a thing? Age-related paranoia?
Well, I mean, paranoia can be like, I don't know if I'd call it paranoia, but you know what? I'm not sure if this person's referring to Alzheimer's, dementia, or other types of dementias, but
maybe
often there's kind of confusion and suspicion and sometimes aggression that comes with dementia, and so that can be part of. I'm not an expert on dementia, but that can be part of symptoms of Alzheimer's and other types of dementias, is suspicion, paranoia, because people are confused and they don't fucking remember who these people are in their house or how they got where they are, and that makes people suspicious and confused and sometimes aggressive. So that can be part of the progression of dementias as well.
Okay, I think that's gonna be like the last thing I asked you about. I'm curious. Okay, so you were talking about like whether I think dinosaurs are secret agents who are chasing me, or I think I need more money. That both of those thoughts, just you think to yourself, I'm having this thought right now, and that's fine, you know, and then you make a decision around it. My question on the heels of that was like, I do find myself sometimes engaging in behaviors or something, and I will recognize that they're compulsive, and I'll just be like, I don't like this. I'm doing this thing that I don't want to be doing, and I'm just doing it. And I still sometimes can't stop it. Like I'm like, you know, even if I'm conscious of it, or it feels like that in a moment. And so I'm wondering if you have any strategies or thoughts around kicking yourself out of a rhythm, or if you do realize like, I don't like this, I know this doesn't feel good, I know this isn't in alignment with my goals, how do I fucking stop? How do I change course?
Totally. Right, totally. So one thing I would say is I would whenever you find yourself saying I can't stop this, I would slap the hand from the cookie jar, because that's just an automatic thought that you're having.
Got it.
Actually, what the reality is that you've not found an effective strategy for reliably interrupting that behavior. That's the reality. Right. Because if somebody else was inhabiting your body, they could stop it.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, and that's not like to invalidate the experience of feeling like you can't stop it. That's totally fucking real. I completely get that. But I would argue with you that I would submit the argument that what's actually happening is you've not found an effective strategy for interrupting the behavior. Could we, right?
Yeah.
So I think one thing that you can try is harnessing a strength that you already have, which is the ability to be impulsive. That can be your strength. So when you notice that, like, oh shit, like when it pops in your mind, like I'm doing something that I don't like, instead of going to your kind of or kind of slow strategy, which is thinking through something, marshaling your willpower and engaging in behavior, just scream out loud and jump up out of your seat and walk into another room.
That's fucking good, actually. That's really helpful.
Just like literally out
Yeah.
loud, yell, stop, drop what's in your hands, and walk into another room and like fucking jump up and down 10 times.
That's good.
Because then you will have stopped that other behavior.
That's good. That's actually really helpful. Because that notion of harnessing this other thing that's a strength that's inherently part of what's already happening is pretty good. Because that's what happens. Is I feel like I get caught in a thought loop where I'm like, I don't know how to stop this. I don't know how to quit doing this.
Short circuit that. That's not the way to immediately interrupt what's going on. That's the way to make a list and check the things off,
Right.
which is also a strength, you know. The strength that you need, the strategy that you need in that moment is literally scream out loud, drop what's in your hands, walk into another room, jump up and down 10 times. Like, try that.
That's good. That's really good. On the same thought, I guess, but different. What do you have any strategies for like the thing I'm just trying to say is fatigue. Like I often feel like depression related fatigue or something like that, but just, sometimes I'm like, I know I slept, I know I ate, I did all the things, and just my body's just like, I can't do anything. I need to lay down. I'm so tired. And that thought you had of like, if someone else is in my body, they could do it. I'm like, I don't know if they could. Maybe they could. Maybe they'd be in my body and then they'd be different. Like maybe it is psychological. And I've come to believe like a lot of my physical elements are somehow created by my mind. But I'm just curious if you have anything, something to try for that. Like if you're just having extreme, I'll just say real quick, the one thing I have been trying to help sometimes is like, I just set a timer. Like I'm like, all right, let's do 20 minutes. I'm going to lay down, close my eyes for 20 minutes and then get up after that. But I don't know if you have anything.
I think that's a great one. I mean, I would also just advance an alternative narrative, which is that there is no such thing as a mental experience and a physical experience. There is only the intersection of mental and physical experiences. Like,
yeah,
we just don't have a mind that exists separate from our body. So everything that happens in our mind is informed by our body. And the only way we know what's happening in our body is as a result of our mind. So it's just an always integrated set of stimulus and reflection. Like there just isn't a way to disentangle one from the other. In fact, there is no one and the other. There is only one.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So that's the first thing. And I actually really like that strategy of just, if you feel really exhausted, you might be exhausted, which is why like when I am doing a mindfulness exercise or something and somebody falls asleep, I just let them fucking sleep, man. They probably need to sleep.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like youth, like they fucking probably need to sleep.
Yeah.
So even in class, man, like if I see somebody fall asleep in class, like I'll just let them sleep.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
But I'll usually talk about it with them later.
Yeah. Check in.
If I find someone sleeping, I think they need to sleep.
But I think that's really helpful to remember that your physical and mental, emotional, whatever, that it's just one experience, and don't use the notion of them as disparate entities to like invalidate each other.
That's like a Cartesian dualism that has just like permeated our Judeo-Christian society, and it's just completely wrong. It just isn't how things are. It's just not correct, but it's like infiltrated our belief system because it's been pounded into us by this Judeo-Christian Cartesian dualism. It just doesn't make sense. That flies in the face of all observable reality. But the other thing is, so when you're feeling really tired, I say first just explore letting yourself rest. But if you're like, wow, I get really tired every time I sit down to file my taxes, and like that's a problem. Okay, well now we have some evidence that there's maybe something else going on, and I think yes, setting your timer is good. Also doing the sleep hygiene stuff, like watching your caffeine intake and the type of foods you're eating, all that type of stuff. Sleep hygiene, like there's protocols online you can read for that.
Totally.
But I would start with all that stuff also, like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think setting the timer is good. You can try, foot in the door and door in the face are two kind of behavior techniques you can try. Like
What's that?
foot in the door being like, let me ease into something. Door in the face being like, let me just fucking go for the hard thing. You can try both of those ways.
That's again like kind of harnessing the impulsivity strength.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're just about done. I'll just add this person who was asking about the age-related paranoia thing said it's about my dad. He has episodes of dementia, which I think are due to diabetes. But one common thing among him and his siblings, all over 50, are mentally paranoid about COVID, among other things, every day, among other everyday things. I will say, I don't know that COVID is paranoia necessarily. Just that's probably just especially if you're over 50 and you're being really careful about it. I mean, it's very real. But
I mean, if you're like wearing shoe boxes on your feet and not touching doorknobs because in your own house that you haven't left, okay, that might be
right.
But if you're consuming a lot of media about it, there's. I think we do have to kind of ground our fears.
Yeah.
But 50 is pretty young to be having dementia. But I think, and I know it's hard right now because of how crazy everything is, but I would try to get your dad in front of a good physician, someone who specializes in older adults, even though he's not really an older adult yet.
Yeah.
Somebody who's good with older adults with complex health needs. He needs to see a physician, a doctor, a medical doctor. It sounds like there's some complex stuff going on.
Got it. Yeah, that's helpful. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's it. We'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, Dr. Nick. There's some really helpful stuff in there that I'm going to use today. In fact, it was hard for me not to just go like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this episode now. As soon as you said that, we're done. We're done for the day. No, I think that's really helpful. Yeah, I don't know. I'll move into another no medication day of ADHD and try to get some work done. Thanks, dude. I really appreciate it. Everybody out there, take care of yourself. Hydrate. Self-care. Be well. All right. Have a good day, everyone.